Welcome back to another episode of Plato's Cave. This is the first episode of what will be a multi-part series on the philosophy of mind, or consciousness, as it's sometimes referred to. So, what we're going to do in this series is dive into competing theories as to what the mind is and why and how experience arises. So, we're starting out the series with an episode on a very classic paper in this debate. It's called What Mary Didn't Know by Frank Jackson, and it was written in 1986. And I think it's a really good and interesting paper to use as a foray into this debate. I am not going to say too much about it now because we jump right into the central thought experiment. But basically, if you've ever heard of Mary, or Mary the color scientist, or Mary's room, that is what Frank Jackson's paper, What Mary Didn't Know, is introducing. It's a famous thought experiment in philosophy. I think it's very interesting. And even more interestingly, Jackson himself, as recently as 2023, I believe, has no longer come to accept this argument. So it's something that he himself changed his mind on over his career, which is very interesting. So I really enjoyed recording this episode and listening back to it during the editing process. I think it holds up. I think it's a great episode, and I hope that you feel the same way. So with that, here's our discussion on What Mary Didn't Know. I was saying before that I was actually sort of not surprised because it's like a good paper, but I was kind of thinking like this is an interesting paper to start a series on, um, like I guess just philosophy of mind in general with, because it's not, I mean, there's a large sense in which like this isn't truly like a philosophy of mind paper. It's just hyper relevant like for that debate. Um, and it uses like examples that are relevant to that debate, but it's kind of about something that's a little bit larger, but it's such a cool, it's such a fun paper. And it plays a central role in the first linchpin of like the first bifurcation of the debate, in this literature that it'll make for a very good first episode. Um and I guess like so I guess I'll say, I mean, I'll probably have said this in the intro, but we're going to talk about Frank Jackson's famous paper, What Mary Didn't Know. It was in the Journal of Philosophy in 1986, whenever you could still publish papers like this, and I'm saying that in I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like a paper like this could be published today because there's just, people would say there's not enough citations, it's too short. You've got to, each reviewer would have like, well, you didn't consider this objection or whatever, it's like, these are just such fun philosophy papers to read. It's
They're
just such a
accessible
fun
too
read.
because they're so short.
They're so short, and also like Frank Jackson's writing is extremely, I don't know what the right word is. Like it's obviously incredibly precise, but it's not a slog to read. And it's technical. Like it's technical writing, but it's not, you don't get fatigued from reading it in the same way that you do from a lot of other stuff, you know?
No, and I think even like, I mean, this is like our first paper here. Um, Kind of gets you up to speed pretty quickly on where the conversation's at.
Hmm.
So, I mean, not a lot of preamble. So you got to appreciate that.
No, it's true. He just gets right into it and right out of it. But basically, oh, should we? I don't know. I could never tell if you guys like this or not. But should we do the thing where on a scale of 1 to 10, how much we liked the paper, and then on a scale of 1 to 10, how much we agreed with it? I always kind of liked that.
Yeah,
Sure,
sure.
I don't mind.
Okay, I would say on a scale from 1 to 10 of how much I liked it, it's a 9. It's just such a fun paper. It's really well written, and he gives you there's a ton of aha moments whenever you get the point that he's making, which is always it's like so rewarding to have those in a paper. How much I agree with it? Um, I would say a 7 out of 10, but my confidence on that is pretty low. At least my confidence that I will end up liking it more is pretty low. I have a high confidence that I will not end up dropping that rating too much, if that makes sense. What about you?
So for me, I also would give this around a 9 in terms of just enjoyment, both for its brevity and just I think it's a great thought experiment. In terms of agreements, um, like broadly speaking, I think he speaks to intuitions I at least hold.
Mm,
Whether the example he gave, in fact, negates
mm,
or disproves physicalism, that's actually a totally different question. So I don't really want to speak on that right now. But at
mm,
least like I like the thought experiment a lot because I'm like, yes, this explains a lot of my intuition regarding these
mhm,
things. So maybe in terms of agreement, like a 6, you know.
mm.
So,
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to you guys. I'm probably around like a more closer to like a 7.5, 8 for enjoyment. Like I thought it was good. Um, and then in terms of agreement, probably similar, like a 7. Like similar to Adam, like I don't if if part of like the agreement
Mm,
has to rest on like whether this disproves physicalism, I feel
mm,
like less strongly on that. I do think it's a
mhm.
great thought experiment, so it gets a lot of points for that, and also the brevity.
Yeah, there's kind of like, I guess there's kind of two sets of questions. There are like questions about the specific points being made in this paper. Then there's another set of questions about, okay, well, given what you think about those, how does it relate to kind of like your positions within philosophy of mind in general? And that connection I'm less confident on, but I'm hoping obviously that like this is why I thought it could be a good paper to start with, as well as like I feel like these are such fundamental intuitions that will apply to other positions more directly. You know what I mean? That's like it's gonna kind of help because
Yeah,
even though I mean, oh, go ahead, Giffen.
I was just gonna say, I think this is a great paper for kind of exploring your own intuitions. Like that, it does a
Yeah.
great job of doing, um,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess I should also say that like even though it's gonna kind of broadly follow like this series, the readings that I did for a seminar. I mean, obviously taking a seminar on a topic doesn't make you an expert. But even after taking a seminar on this stuff, I still feel like there are really like many genuinely open doors for the positions that I could land on in a lot of these debates. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't know that this one is more this debate is just like more open for me than a lot of other ones are. Like there are just certain debates in like I don't know free will that are just I'm just not open to anymore at this point. Like after just you know what I mean. But this one is like I'm pretty open to like almost anything in the field.
yeah, I'm not really on anything at this point.
Hmm.
I mean, we should note that Jackson does now reject this.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
yeah, so that's an important thing to note that as
Hmm.
much as we might agree with him in this paper, he rejects his own paper at this point.
That
So
is true.
that's
Yeah.
another very important thing to keep in mind as we read this.
Mm.
And the thing is, there's so much in the field around this paper that you'll have people not Jackson that will, fight knives out for this paper and and all the conversations that have happened since relating to it. But it's important to note that the author has actually come to see um, an issue with his knowledge argument here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had discovered that fact, but I didn't really explore it, like the reasoning behind it. I don't know if it's terribly relevant, but I do think like it comports with my impression of like the field of philosophy of mind that someone can just completely reverse such a like a pivotal like kind of paper. That just like feels
Mhm.
very on track for me.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
I tried listening to a bit of a podcast where he gets into why he's changed his mind, and he listed a few papers that he read subsequent to writing this one that then
Mm.
changed his mind. So I think we should add those to the reading list.
That would be
Yeah.
rich.
It's a lot of kind of representational uh
Mm.
kind of knowledge.
Do you
So
remember any names by chance of the criticisms? Like the people, the authors of the criticisms?
none that really stuck out to me. Here's what I'll say.
Okay,
If you gave me a multiple choice of four names,
sure.
I
Yeah.
could tell you which ones they were. But
Okay. Yeah, I was just
We
yeah.
curious.
can get that afterwards. That would be very
Yeah.
interesting to kind of explore the same track that he went down.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Do you want to, I was thinking it would probably be best just to read that first paragraph, the thought experiment that he lays out, because
Oh yeah.
it's pretty classic. I mean, people have probably, if people are familiar with this area at all, they've probably heard of this thought experiment, but I'll just read how the paper starts. Mary is confined to a black and white room, is educated through black and white books and through lectures relayed on black and white television. In this way, she learns everything there is to know about the physical nature of the world. She knows all the physical facts about us and our environment in a wide sense of physical, which includes everything in completed physics, chemistry, and neurophysiology, and all there is to know about the causal and relational facts consequent upon all this, including, of course, functional rules. If physicalism is true, she knows all there is to know. For to suppose otherwise is to suppose that there is more to know than every physical fact, and that is just what physicalism denies. So it's it's just a wonderful it's just a one paragraph I don't know, just sets it up so beautifully. And and then he goes on to basically say he gives a you know a little clarification that's good to kind of reiterate for us and for the listeners. So okay, so physicalists, if you are a physicalist, you must hold that the complete physical knowledge is complete knowledge simpliciter. So basically, if you know all the physical facts, then you know all the facts that there are to know. Um, and so basically, I mean, he basically just kind of, you know, sets up the syllogism and then concludes or gives like the last premise in his argument. He just says, it seems, however, that Mary does not know all there is to know. For when she is let out of the black and white room or given a color television, she will learn what it is like to see something red. So, I
I
mean,
think we should actually read the paragraph, the second to last sentence as well. And that one, I want to
Okay.
read this real fast here because I
Okay,
think it's
sure, yeah.
I like the little syllogism. So,
mm,
um, for suppose it is not complete. So actually, let me start a little above there. So this is why physicalists must hold that complete physical knowledge is complete knowledge simpliciter. For suppose it is not complete, then our world must differ from a world P, for which it is complete, and the difference must be in non-physical facts, for our world and world P agree on all matters physical. Hence, physicalism would be false at our world, though contingently so, for it would be true at world P. So,
mm,
yeah.
mm.
So I thought that was like a very simple syllogism that I thought um just laid out the knowledge argument simply, you know?
No,
So
you're right. That is a great way to lay it out. I mean, so first pass reactions to his argument, my intuition is definitively yes, she learns something new upon leaving the room, upon seeing red for the first time. What was
I agree. I agree.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like the intuition. But I will say, as like kind of my reading continued, I was starting to feel like the bounds of my knowledge about knowledge, like, the field of
Mm,
epistemology. And that
mhm.
is something that, Jordan, I hope you can fill in the dullards' minds with, because as a dullard myself, I think I could use some filling in.
The dull
That that
leading the
that's
dullards.
that's like where I was like feeling the bounds of like kind of the argument and the
Yeah.
ability to like push back against like the thought experiment. In terms of like the raw intuition immediately though, yeah, she learned something new.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, no.
it's very tough because the thing is like um once again we can't imagine what it's like to have complete physical knowledge and to also kind of logically go through every single step and what it actually entails. It's unimaginable, honestly, but at the same time it's like, is my intuition that it logically follows,
Mhm.
what it's like to see red just by following physical laws.
Yeah.
At least my intuition breaks down there. I say like, I just don't think so. I think there's actually something kind of missing, but I could be wrong. But at least I kind of get that's my intuition.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean the good thing is that so I did at the bottom of this first page, I did jot down a few questions that do seem to kind of come up later on. Like one question that I had is like, does the kind of knowledge matter? That comes up again in a response to an objection because I'm thinking like, like in epistemologies, there's like a concept of like there's propositional knowledge, and this comes up later, like knowledge that. And then there's like functional knowledge, or like it's called how to knowledge, or like know-how rather. So it's like that, and that's kind of different than propositional knowledge. Like if I know how to tie my shoe, I don't, that's not straightforwardly like a proposition. It can be translated into a set of propositions, but even knowing those like you know what I mean? It's just not the same. Like it's kind of a different category of knowledge.
And we have
Yeah, I
discovered
agree.
the bounds of my my knowledge, certainly. But yeah, no, I agree that they feel like different kinds. I just don't know how to like place those kind of like feelings about
Yeah.
knowledge into like the discussion here.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. Completely agree.
Let's table it for a second because I do recall what was written on 294 being kind of like quenching of those concerns a little bit, but I don't know
294.
how
All right.
fully. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, it'd be kind of nice to chat more about what physicalism is. I
Hmm.
mean, do we want to start with just like a definition of if you know all the facts of physicalism, you understand how all matter behaves within the universe, like and how
Yes.
matter interacts with other matter, how matter interacts with space time itself. But
Hmm.
you know how things or stuff in this case the universe just being everything. So you know how stuff within everything interacts.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, and yeah, because I'm just looking back at the original definition that
Yep.
Jackson offers because it's all of the, completed physics, completed chemistry, completed biology, and all there is to know about the causal and relational facts consequent upon this, including, of course, functional roles. So, I mean, the image I get is that you, if you're a physicalist and you have complete physical knowledge of all physical things, like you are essentially you've just got a godlike view of the universe
Yes.
essentially from
Yes.
that perspective. And the question is okay, so if you had that godlike perspective with the inputs being only physical facts, would you subsequently be able to know experiential facts? Like, and then, then that's kind of like made specific in the Mary example. But so I guess one of the challenging things is that I guess one of the challenging things about the debate is that like it is actually it's saying okay, consciousness could be the only thing that's not like this.
I mean, it's
I
just
mean,
so interesting, like when you get like a very detailed kind of view of like the physicalism described here, or at least like Mary's perspective on it. Because like you can imagine Mary is able to look at a brain and from like the quarks all the way up to just
hmm
like brain tissue has just a complete understanding of like how every single level kind of rises through kind of some sort of like emergent properties, how you get to
Yeah.
each single
hmm
layer. And then that's like a brain state of hers at that time that is kind of like that is holding that, concept of some other brain at that point.
hmm
But her brain state, in fact, actually needs to be entirely different to see the color red. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yes.
something like something physically has to be so
He,
that just speaks to me like two very different types of
mm.
knowledges there, where it's just like two totally different brain states. So
yeah. the way I was kind of imagining, like playing with kind of the thought experiment, is that if she had like this kind of, I love the way you described it, as kind of just like from quarks all the way up,
Yeah.
um,
Mm,
of like her own brain, like she could, in theory, like with the proper like tool set, kind of
mm,
like wire like kind of the neurons to then experience red, absent actual red, but still
yeah.
prior to having that brain state, she wouldn't have like the knowledge of red, despite all the prior knowledge, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like I don't
Yeah,
think you could like I don't think you can logic your way into,
into what it
like
feels like to see
yeah,
redness.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think
So
that's
Yes.
fair. Yeah. Well, also, just I wanted to say
Mm.
to your point earlier, I think Adam or one of you brought it up, but like it's also just so difficult to conceive of having that like godlike power of works up. It's like
Yeah.
to hold all of that information in like one brain state requires something beyond like certainly the mortal mind. So
infinity
like
brain.
maybe there's an
So
emergent
Yeah.
property that develops within you when you're at that godlike state where indeed redness. I've logicked my way there. Like it's
Yeah.
actually so hard to imagine like being in that state. Um,
I was gonna ask if you guys wanted to kind of like move through the clarifications and the criticisms because they actually really did track a lot of my own kind of like questions and criticisms
yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
this
for
paper.
sure.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it wasn't like a well you might think you're like no it's all right what I was thinking. But these are like actually very good ones to like you know what I
No,
mean?
I agree. I agree.
yeah.
Okay,
Impressive considering the length of the paper. It's just
it's
like
amazing just how much he puts into 5 pages. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so yeah, he gives us three clarifications, and I thought that actually, yeah, they grew in importance to me as they went on. So basically, like the first one he does clarify like kind of something that we were talking about already, is that the knowledge argument does not rest on the dubious claim that logically you cannot imagine what sensing red is like unless you have sensed red. So, and he's just going to say like, okay, like powers of imagination are not to the point of this thought experiment.
It's
It's
not
not that she
knowledge. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, the way that I kind of thought about it is like, maybe she could imagine, maybe she couldn't. But the point is that even if she does successfully imagine what it's like, it from her perspective, she doesn't know if that imagination is correct or incorrect yet. It's you don't actually gain knowledge until you experience what it is like. So that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just wholeheartedly agreed with that one. The second one I again just very much agreed with. Um, so it was actually kind of I don't know if you guys had this experience reading it the first time, but I missed like the key word there being intentionality because he said like secondly, the intentionality of knowledge is not to the point. The argument does not rest on assuming falsely that if S knows that A is F and A equals B, then S knows that B is F. Because at first I was like, wait a minute. I was like, yeah, they would know. But I'm like, oh, no. It's about whether they would know that B is F. Because I'm like, wait, B is F. If like, I was caught up on the syllogism part of it. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
It's the relevant thing is like, whether so basically he's just specifying here that okay you've got to assume that Mary is a perfect reasoner in addition to having complete total physical knowledge. So the question, it's not going to hang on whether she herself is kind of able to make the right deduction. No, we're going to say okay she's a perfect reasoner, so if the totality of physical knowledge is enough to get yourself to knowing what it's like uh to experiencing what it is to see red, then if physicalism is true she will know that because we're not going to have that linkage crumble with her reasoning abilities,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I thought was a good clarification again. And the third one was actually the most important to me.
It is.
um
Yeah.
so he thirdly clarifies that the knowledge Mary lacked, which is of particular point for the knowledge argument against physicalism, is knowledge about the experience of others, not about her own. When she is let out, she has new experiences, new color experiences she has never had before. It is not, therefore, an objection to physicalism that she learns something on being let out. Before she was let out, she could not have known facts about her experience of red, for there were no such facts to know. I'm just going to pause and say, first, like I just had a little check right against there. I'm like, okay, yeah, that does make sense to me because if like according to the physicalist thesis, of course she's not going to know what red looks like because she hasn't physically seen red. Like it's not like that's not the mystery there. Skipping a few sentences. The trouble for physicalism is that after Mary sees her first ripe tomato, she will realize how impoverished her conception of the mental life of others has been all along. She will realize that there was all the time she was carrying out her laborious investigations into the neurophysiologies of others and into the functional roles of their internal states, something about these people she was quite unaware of. All along, their experiences, or many of them, those that got from tomatoes, the sky, etc., had a feature conspicuous to them, but uh, conspicuous to them, but until now hidden from her. But she knew all the physical facts about them all along. Hence, what she did not know until her release is not a physical fact about their experiences, but it is a fact about them. That is the trouble for physicalism. Okay, so pause, rewind, translating all of that. Okay, so when I read that, here's how I'm kind of taking this in here. So, okay, so the real problem for the physicalist thesis is that Mary, having learned everything there is to know about everything, but specifically about color, all the physical facts about like seeing color, about what color is, and I think importantly too, this kind of goes unnoticed, or at least it went unnoticed by me the first time I read this, is like the functional roles even of these internal states. But pause on that for now. Knowing all of that physical knowledge will not bring along with it, it will not entail that she recognizes that others are having the experience of seeing red, that, you know, that there's like a qualia, that there's something that it's like to see red besides all of this other information. Um, so I'm going to pause. I have notes that I want to talk about, but what do
Yeah,
we think about this?
I just think it's very similar to what we talked about just before this, where like Mary's conception of her or yeah, conception of like her own brain from like the cork all the way up to like the brain tissue. And we said right after that, like, what if she had the ability to like manipulate her own brain state and then she could see red at that point?
Mhm.
However, let's say she doesn't have the ability to manipulate her own, her own brain matter in such a way. She's only aware of it. Well, in that case, she is able to recognize other brain states in others, but does not know that there is that seeing red associated with it. So until she goes out and sees red or the external stimulus actually like
Mhm.
creates the brain state necessary for the experience of seeing red, she does not know she it does not logically entail from others' brain states on their own that others are having this specific experience of seeing red. Because she
Mhm.
might actually know, like, okay, if she knows like people report to seeing something other than black and white, it actually corresponds to this brain state. She can be fully aware of that fact, but she doesn't know what it's like to see red until then, until she
Mhm.
sees red for herself. She knows that there is some experience associated with it, but she doesn't know the experience of seeing red. So,
She knows. Wait, say that part again. So she knows. Well, here's okay. Actually, this is my question, and this is why I wonder if like I think there's something interesting going on here that I didn't pick up on the first time I read it. And it's in like it should I almost wonder if this should be italicized. So like this is at the very bottom of the page. She will realize that there was all the time she was carrying out these investigations into the neurophysiologies of others and into the functional roles of their internal states. Something about these people she was quite unaware of. I think there's a huge amount of work being played by that phrase and into the functional roles of their internal states. Because okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Like, tell me if you guys agree with this or not. Because obviously, if she knows all the physical facts, she's going to know, like this is going to simplify it, but obviously she's going to know, like the brain state. She's going to know what the color red is. It's a certain wavelength or whatever, right? She's going to also know all about the eyes. She's going to know how light travels, and she's going to know about the brain and certain brain states that correlate to seeing, to having red enter the pupils, whatever, right? And if she has the totality of physical knowledge, she's also going to have within her grasp everything that those physical things do when seeing red, including talking about red, right? So she's going to
Yeah.
have all of
Yeah.
that information too. But but this is what I'm thinking about here with this kind of caveat is like, okay, but this requires, if I'm understanding this correctly, this really does require like taking on a very dehumanized perspective of Mary for a second, because you have to like really embody like the scientist, like physicalist perspective. Because okay, from this perspective, like these are all like just causal functional relationships going on here, right? So she's thinking like, okay, basically there's so from her perspective, it's weird because when we hear people say like, oh, that's red, or what is it like to see red? Well, it's kind of close to orange, it's kind of close to, you know what I mean? It's like in between orange and yellowy and purpley, right? The problem is that like we default to thinking about that in experiential terms. But I think the key is that she's not going to be able to do that because these are all like she's almost viewing that in like a billiard ball interacting with other billiard balls way of thinking about
Sure.
things, like
Sure.
purely from a removed, like this is, oh, this kind of like, you can almost think about it like these wavelengths are results of like being exposed to this trigger. Does that make sense? Do you
Yeah.
guys agree with the way I'm thinking about it?
Yeah. I do. Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that's a huge linchpin in this argument where, and I think the key,
I know what you're going with there, but you did include like almost like the from her perspective, the automatons that she observes do
Mhm.
say that there is something to seeing red. So,
She just
well,
has to
I
see it
don't
in a
I don't view
removed.
Mary as a physicalist, right? I mean, she just has perfect physical knowledge.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, because it's like you're kind of assuming one thing about the conclusion of the entire argument, one way or the other, right? Like, because like
Sure. Yeah, you're right.
yeah,
I didn't
like
mean for it
we
to be like that, but you're right. Yeah.
yeah, because like then Mary can explain all of her experience, regardless of the red. Like if she has perfect physical knowledge and she's able to
Hmm.
explain her qualia perfectly with
Yes.
perfect
Yeah.
physical knowledge, then she is a physicalist, and if not, she's not. So, but the question though
It's
is like, but did that make sense?
yeah,
She's the
it's
only one that
almost
could
like
know, in fact. So
Mary. It's almost like we have to assume that Mary herself is like not a human. Like, because the problem is okay. This is good. You're making me like, this is kind of the concern that I'm worried about is, okay, so if like Mary knows that she's a human that is the exact same species as like all these humans that she's studying, I worry that there's a way where like she can kind of backdoor into the knowledge, but in a way that isn't the point of the thought experiment. So like if she's able to like differentiate between black and white, and she knows like, okay, oh, well, these are kind of like, she has all the physical knowledge. So she knows that, like, okay, there's kind of, this is the difference between these two is kind of similar to the difference between these two or something like that. You know, red and black or versus red and white versus like
No, that
whatever.
that's not exactly what I'm going for. I'm more so saying like she doesn't need to see red or not see red to come to a conclusion
Hmm.
about whether physicalism is true or not.
Oh yeah,
Right?
no,
She
100%.
could
Yeah.
she could stay within the room and perfectly explain her experience if physicalism is true.
Hmm.
Like she all ignore all the qualia, potential experience outside the room.
Hmm.
Everything in the room can be explained experientially from
Yeah.
yeah. See
Yeah,
again,
that's so
okay.
interesting that actually she doesn't need to leave the room at all. Like she will, at the
No, she
moment that
doesn't.
she has the
Hmm.
full knowledge, she simply knows if physicalism is true or not.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Maybe what I was saying was a
In fact,
separate.
Mary does know everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a separate concern. And it's sometimes this I don't know why, but this like area of philosophy is sometimes really hard to actually say what you're trying to say, as
Oh
opposed
yeah,
to like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very
yeah,
hard to say what you're trying to say.
couldn't agree
Okay,
more.
here's a concern that I have. If Mary knows that she's a human and she knows that like she's studying all these other humans, um, couldn't she, if she is a perfect reasoner and she has totality of like the physical knowledge, couldn't she kind of backdoor her way into the recognition that others must have experiences of seeing red? Um, hold on, let me pause for a second. What is the she will realize how impoverished her conception of all along all along their experience. What's the success condition? Is it just that she will recognize she knew all the physical facts about them all along. So what she didn't know, if physicalism is false about other people, is she didn't know, is it that there was an experience of seeing red they were having? Is that what she will not know if physicalism is false?
I think that could only be true if she was like this amorphous entity outside the
That's
universe.
exactly
Like,
what I was saying. That's exactly
yeah,
what I was just
yeah.
trying to get at, is because I'm worried that if she's a perfect reasoner, all she has to do is kind of recognize like, okay, I'm having an experience of seeing black versus white. If this is something that's on their visual spectrum, there's an experience to seeing that too. But the problem with that is like, but that's kind of not the point.
It's
Yeah,
not that
yeah,
they're
yeah.
R-
experiencing red, it's what it is like to experience red.
I think that is like the kind of lesser claim almost in a sense is that like because like that's like the idea that she will learn something new upon seeing red.
And
But the
even
other
physicalism would agree with that.
but the more dramatic claim in like the third part is that it's like okay, she has no conception that there is experience at all that correlates with this brain state without actually but she would as we're talking right now because in fact she is a human, she does have conversations with people, she is aware that different
Mhm.
cones on the all this biology knowledge is is completely beyond me at this point, but
No, you got it.
there are receptors in the eyes that that in fact, there is like some sort of neural firing, associated with certain wavelengths. So she knows that like as a conscious creature that takes in stimulus, these other creatures take in different stimulus and their brains process it differently. The assumption is, of course, her being a human, she knows that there is an experience. She doesn't know what it's like to see red, but she knows there's an experience. But the more dramatic
I
question
mean,
of like, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure I'm following 100%.
Okay.
So we're assuming that her knowledge base includes her own knowledge of her own experiences and that she's like kind of analogizing that to like a stimulus that she's not experienced, like which is the
Well,
color red.
that's my worry is that if you give the reason why I'm worried about it is because it seems like she could arrive at that knowledge, but only because you're baking it into the original kind of starting condition, which then I don't think it answers anything. So I was wondering if the real, like the best version of this argument stipulates that Mary is, whether she can be a human with perfect reasoning or whatever, but just kind of make her like this, just make her a being, right? With perfect knowledge and perfect intelligence. But she doesn't know that she herself is a human or she's not a human. So that she can't so that she can't use her own experience as a an inferential tool to learn about the experience of others. Because I guess the reason why I'm thinking that that's important is because it's begging the question almost, if physicalism is true, if you get to use inferential experiential knowledge. Like the whole point is that we're questioning right now is are the totality of physical facts all the facts? But if you bake in your own experiences and you put that into the pot with the totality of physical facts, well, then of course you're going to be able to infer that other people are having experiences when they see other things on the visual spectrum. But that's my worry, I think.
I'm not sure.
You want
I'm
you
actually not sure if that's the case, and maybe I'm still like not fully grasping. But like, is does she know have like does she know that like because not everything produces an experience in the
Hmm.
same way that like seeing red does.
Hmm.
Does she know that from like a certain brain state an experience comes off of that? Because like seeing red and seeing like ultraviolet,
Hmm.
like you're not going to get an experience from seeing ultraviolet because it's outside of our spectrum. Like, would she be able to like grasp like which one of those brain states is associated with experience versus those that are not?
I think this is what I was saying is the problem. If she can use her own, if she can experiment on herself essentially and use her own experience as feedback to infer about others, because the problem for me is because like if I'm understanding the question, she could basically just like she could okay here damn here's why I'm worried about that is because then she's going to be able to arrive at the knowledge about others' experience, whether physicalism is true or false. Like if
And that's
physicalism is,
because her knowledge isn't just only physical things, it includes her own experiences.
and
And
not only that, it also includes her being able to use that as like a reference to to know about what other humans are
and
experiencing.
that's because of her perfect knowledge of brain states.
Yes,
She can
yes,
look her like essentially look at her brain in a mirror and say, "I have
yeah,
experiences that I recognize, and it is associated with these brain states." And only
because
because she has experience is she able to like analogize.
yeah,
yes,
you
and
you
here's
you you want like the like interdimensional entity that kind of comes in and just like observes the universe and has all the same knowledge Mary has and is like from afar, you know, is there something like being this creature? I am not of this universe,
yes,
but I know everything. I know perfectly how matter interacts in this universe.
Works up.
Do I know if
hmm
this is a creature that experiences or not? So
Oh, so like a
it,
philosophical zombie, is that what it is? Like Mary as a
yes,
no.
yeah,
philosophical zombie?
I think a little bit, yeah.
Well, I don't know. It just depends on what you mean. In a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. I don't think that Mary herself has to like not have any experience, but she
No,
just,
no,
it's
no,
almost like,
but it's
yeah,
similar to the philosophical zombie because it's just like, can you imagine a world in which, you know, all the same chemistry and physics applies, but there's no experience associated with it. So we're pretty much
oh, I
asking
misunderstood.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, so we're
yeah, I
it's very,
misunderstood what
very
Giffin was
similar.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Not that
yes,
she's a
Giffen.
zombie.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Giffin. I thought you were saying that like Mary was a philosophical zombie, but
No,
like,
I that was one of the possibilities I was exploring, to be honest. Like it was unclear to me kind of like where we were at.
No, that
Okay.
makes sense.
with like who
What
knows
I
what
was
about what.
what I was thinking is like a more down to earth version of like I guess what I'm trying to say is like it's almost as though like imagine that we kind of like traveled light years to like another galaxy and encountered a like a just like a group of beings essentially or like just creatures that had a completely different evolutionary tree. They just operated with like different, they relied on different matter to survive than we do. Like, instead of breathing oxygen, they breathe like whatever. If we were kind of like in Mary's position, I think that like, that is almost what I'm hoping for with this thought experiment, where we can't make inferences based on our own experience to what we think is theirs because we just share nothing in common. So then
Right.
it
So
really does come down to if we're perfect reasoners and we have the totality of the physical knowledge, do we have the totality of all knowledge?
yeah, so if you go to another like galaxy and there's these like silicon based like cuboid like geometry creatures with like
Yes.
paths like networks and association between molecules, like does she know that they're experiencing like red?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think so now that we've made precise the thought experiment, I have a very strong, very powerful intuition that the answer is no, that she would not know that seeing that, being exposed to red
Yeah.
brought along with it an experience of seeing red. That there is nothing contained in the totality of physical knowledge that would indicate that.
I'm less certain about
Well,
that. I feel like
and
that's actually a more radical claim than she learned something upon seeing red.
Mm,
It definitely is
yeah.
a more radical claim that to have knowledge of a specific experience versus knowledge that experience emerges.
Mm,
That a certain configuration produces experience, but she doesn't know what that experience is. You know what I'm saying? Like it definitely is a
yeah.
step further. I've generally kind of had that perspective over time that is true,
Mm,
but I definitely want to read more papers before
yeah, no, for
before I
sure.
hop back on that. But yeah,
I was almost I was thinking about kind of a version of what Giffin was saying, where it's like, because some things are associated with conscious experience and some things aren't. And so from her perspective, looking at like, a different species or if she's not human, whatever, I don't think that there would be anything in the uh totality of physical information to be able to distinguish between the two. Because I'm assuming,
I'm sorry, the two being
oh, I'm sorry, um, stimuli that do produce conscious
oh,
experience and stimuli that do not. Because I would,
right.
I'm assuming that
Because
like,
it's not just a question about the stimuli, it's also a question about like the thing within which like the stimuli is like affecting. So like the brain, or in
yeah,
this case, like the silicon cuboid, creatures in outer space.
yeah, because it's just like,
Yeah, I don't know how you look at that, like just the physical facts, and know it all if there's experience tied to it.
I
And
wonder if
even
you'd be able to like if you had like perfect physical knowledge. Would you be able to know whether the brain is creating representations of things, like regardless of whether there's an experience or not?
I guess you'd have to tell me what you mean
physical
by a
knowledge.
representation
I
that's
mean, like
not
I'm talking
conscious.
about, yeah. I mean, like, um, okay, what about like computers? Like, we don't think computers are
Mm,
conscious, but we think that like some of them hold very complex representations of things
mm,
during processing. So it's like, would she be fully aware of all the representations that are, being represented within any physical
mm.
system?
I would think so, right? Because if it, I mean, I'm kind of betraying my ignorance here, but like that does, it obviously produces a physical change in the brain whenever you are logging something in that way, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
definitely.
she would, yeah, and like Jackson specifies, she would know all of the causal connections there. So my thought is yes.
Well, I don't. Sorry, I'm like trying to parse this still. I'm not sure
It's
if I fully understand
hard.
like representations and like advanced machines at all. Like, I'm not sure if I know what the word representation means in this context, to be
Extremely
honest.
fair.
Um,
I don't know
but
how.
also, I'm just thinking about like our knowledge about
It's a
like,
pretty abstracted thing, but we
Yeah.
we can talk about it if you wish.
I mean, is that something that you guys like had previously discussed or slash know more about it than me, or are we just gonna?
I don't know if I know more about it than you, but like when I'm talking about representations, I'm talking about like very much um in the case of like computers, let's say,
Yeah,
you either have like um with respect to like binary, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You either got some sort of like electrical current at this strength or another strength or maybe possibly zero depending on how the system's set up
Hmm.
to indicate either like one or zero.
Yes,
But then there's like all these associated logic gates
yes.
like built into like the physical system that would actually tell you the interaction between all these different physical states and as a result like what sort of representation collectively those indicate. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I get that. Okay, here's like, let me give you a quick example, I guess. So this is about like what we know about like more about like the human brain. Like we know that like when people we can know, for example, like what a person's brain state looks like when they report imagining like a cube or report imagining, X, Y, Z.
sure.
But I mean, is it a represent like from Mary's perspective, who knows all physical things, is she aware of like of what is being imagined in that brain state? Like, does she
I don't
have
I
think
any
she could
correlate?
know. She
I
can't she can't know what's being imagined above and beyond like just looking at the brain state, right? She can know all changes in brain state, but it's not like she could know,
A consciously
you know,
reported correlate of imagination. She does not have access to that.
I don't think so. And the reason why I'm gonna say no is because it's the exact same concern I had about her being able to infer.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm worried that again she could do that with language if she spoke the same language. I'm almost viewing it as like she would for this experiment, like the purest version of this thought experiment is she can't know that she's the same species or just isn't then because I guess she wouldn't have the totality of all physical knowledge if she didn't know that. But like so she just isn't the same species and she's not speaking the same language. So like because I mean I
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
spell
yeah.
out the concern, but it's the same
No, no,
concern.
no. That's what I was kind of trying to parse in
Yeah.
this when it like, I'm trying to relate that
Yeah. So she,
intuition
because
to
that
like
is the
representation.
functional. Yeah, that is like the functional knowledge. So she could have like exquisite mappings of like all the things people tend to say and like, all of that. That's all included. Um, but she can't know. Yeah, the question is, well, the question is whether she would be able to know that that is associated with a conscious, like an experience of. Yeah, and
okay.
yeah, I mean, obviously it's just an
I just want to
intuit.
throw this. Yeah, I just want to
Yeah,
throw this out there.
Throw it out.
yeah.
Someone who had like infinite knowledge about physical systems. Do you think that they could, knowing everything about my computer, know exactly what's being depicted on the screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay. Do you think that there is um, something analogous to the brain where the brain obviously holds representations of concepts like memories, like certain ideologies, even things like right now that I'm kind of holding in the the back of my mind, whatnot. I mean, these are all like physically manifested in some way.
Mhm.
Is there any way to like decode that? What do you think that? What do you think about
That
that?
Adam, that was exactly the thought experiment I was trying to like parse out. Because like in I don't know, like in terms of like the question of like the computer versus the monitor, like we have like a way to tell the whatever the computer state is to represent it in X way. I don't know if we can plug a like monitor into a brain and like competently represent like anything. That's right. That's the question. Like if that person was imagining like a rectangle in their head, right? Eyes closed, like all that they're like envisioning is a rectangle. Could we ever like access that visual information with just like the brain and like no communication, etc.?
Maybe I'm
My
misunderstanding.
intuition is yes. Like I think
We could access like we could plug in sufficiently and then get a rectangle on a screen. That's what you're suggesting?
well, that exact phrasing, I don't know, but I think that like with enough data sifting, like it, because at the
My
end of the day,
concern
okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. My concern is that we could only do such a thing with like the reporting of people to correlate it with like I am thinking of a rectangle right now. I'm thinking of a cube right now. Like compiling that enough, we might be able to do so. But without like access to that, I don't know that we could. And that's my concern.
And that
I
was
wonder if there's so
exactly
much noise. I wonder if there's like so much noise in that because like at the end of the day, I mean, do we agree that like
Like,
if my eyes are closed and right now I'm imagining a rectangle pretty clearly,
yeah.
like that that is represented, it could be represented in a completely scattered way, but in some way it is represented, it's manifested physically, no?
No,
yes,
I agree with
yeah.
that. It's just I could we ever access that information? If you had your eyes closed and you were being like tortured or like, someone who wanted to like get access to your brain, could they ever find it? Could they ever
Was
I
it
mean, I guess in that scenario like they would have access to like maybe language and like, if they were also
that's
humans.
yeah, that's exactly why I was like thinking that for the thought experiment to be pure, Mary
Yes.
couldn't speak the same language because then she's just doing you're baking the solution into the problem. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
because
no,
she
Jordan, I think I
so
really see like the pure vision of like the thought experiment because like correlates based on like
yeah.
people's like representations. I mean, I don't know if that counts as physical knowledge in the first place, to be honest, but
Because I just think like because I think the point at the end of the day, if physicalism is true and you're a perfect reasoner, you should be able to, because you're a perfect reasoner, derive all facts about experience from all facts about physical knowledge, right? Like if the thesis is true, and without being able to correlate, from experiential reference or
yes.
from language reference of others, I don't see how you could like I don't
Yeah.
see. I mean, obviously that's
So
just an intuition, but I don't
that's
see
my
My
intuition.
intuition, crazy enough, tonight has gone the opposite direction.
You think you
I'm
really.
could
like,
plug the brain in and output a rectangle and know that it's like with like know that that's
well,
what like
How do
well,
you know that that's the issue, though?
it's interesting because like what I want to go to instead is it's very similar because to what you're just asking, but it's almost like
you go to a better
okay,
question.
no, I think you're getting to the heart of it. You are getting to the heart of it, but I just imagine like okay, Jordan's kind of interdimensional entity that is viewing the universe
Right.
and is observing like let's say it's observing the pure machinery of like the computer, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it doesn't know any of the output, and it doesn't, but it knows perfectly how this universe works.
Every electron inside of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's like, okay, could it deduce? It doesn't know any of the logic that when you can imagine like this computer was built extremely messily. Like it's not, our neat little logic gates. It's all over the place. And looking at it, it's a complete mess. It seems like this area is, there's some charge associated with this in several different places that actually correlate to something completely different on the other end, actually the output. But the question is like, with perfect knowledge, could you actually almost like work? Could you deduce? Could you sift through all that to make sense of it to where there's actually an underlying pattern and you actually can figure out the output? If that makes any sense.
It does make sense.
Can I ask? Um, okay, so in this like scenario that you're describing, we are okay, so sorry, just for my own clarity's sake. So the task is to figure out like if you can extract what someone's experience is from the raw, like for lack of a better word, data from their brain.
Yeah.
I guess like my question isn't just an understanding the question, is included in our algorithm for figuring that out, is included in that also, you know, are we feeding into the algorithm, experiential report as part of the data? Like,
No.
no. Okay,
No.
then I don't know how you would ever get that off the ground.
We have ones and zeros, right, Adam? That's what we have.
Well, Jordan's gone back to the brain at this point. So
Oh, I'm
the
I'm sorry. What was I didn't realize we had moved on from that. Can you clarify?
Adam had shifted to a computer quest, like same kind of scenario, except ones and zeros and electrons flowing instead of
Hmm.
within the context of a brain.
except with the computer example, the main difference being um, we identify the output is certainly a physical output,
Hmm.
and then we make an exception for experience, and we say no, the experience actually is not a physical output. Um, it's really just something non-physical. So, but I'm kind of wondering if that actually begins to collapse a little bit. Um, I don't know. I don't know if it's just tonight, but I have like a weird intuition that I don't know.
I yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard because I almost like can see it both ways, but but I don't know how to mesh because you're asking a similar question, but from a very different angle. You know what I mean? Um, and when you phrase it like that, it's like, well, can we imagine that all of the outputs are physical, but that the experience is not physical? I'm it's such a like, I mean, my reaction is like, maybe, maybe not. I just, it's almost like the intuition is like, it's too raw. It's just like, I just don't know. Like
Yeah, I don't know
I've
either.
never,
I feel like that's the issue with like kind of like the philosophical zombie to me a little bit is just like it presupposes there is a difference between the physical output of and when I say physical output, I'm saying like pure brain representations, just like layers and layers and layers of representations, like n to the whatever,
Mhm.
and experience. And I wonder about that right now. So
I see the
so
wonder. I see the wonder. I'm almost in like a position where I'm almost in a position where I kind of need to work through my intuitions and let the powerful ones inform the non-powerful ones, where it's like, because all I can say for now is that I have an extremely powerful intuition, that if Mary was not the same species and did not speak the same language, that she would not derive those experiential facts from the totality of physical ones. And then the question of how that translates to your question is, I'm not sure yet. You know what I mean? Like I almost like actually that's hopefully that's kind of something that like you know what like I slash we should do throughout the series is like it'd be very interesting to kind of like keep just on a piece of paper or something like okay, keep things that I'm pretty like ready to sign up for. Just on a piece of paper, like see, okay, are these consistent? Like, can they are they compatible with each other? Like, you know what I mean? I think that'd be actually pretty interesting.
I think it really would. And the example tonight, I don't know which of you gave it, might have been Giffin, the closing the eyes and imagining the rectangle. That actually kind of shifted my intuition a little bit because I'm like,
I think that was me who gave it.
yeah, I'm
Mhm.
like, that is manifested physically. And so
Mhm.
you're pretty much would argue like you can only go one direction. Like you I could only ever give you I'm imagining the rectangle and you've got a perfect representation of my brain. And you say, okay, because we know that you are imagining the rectangle, these areas correspond to the representation of the rectangle. But I'm wondering with perfect physical knowledge, could you actually work the other direction? Because it's just like, is there actually a pattern to sift through the noise to actually know what the output really was? Um,
Without experiential
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That is one where I just have to say, like, for now, I don't have refined enough intuitions to just to honestly even know what I think about it yet. I just don't. I just don't know what I think.
That'll be true for me throughout this entire series. Unrefined intuition is all I got.
Do you guys want to talk about any of the objections? Um, because the
From like the
first
other
one,
readings.
no, the objections like
Oh, within
to
like page.
yeah, because I'm just wondering if
Yeah.
that'll kind of like I just wonder if talking about those will add any kind of like shed any light on what we've been talking about. I mean, the first one is the objection about the types of knowledge. Um,
Yeah. That's
you
kind
know,
of just outside my realm of understanding at this point, to be honest. Like the knowledge by description, knowledge by acquaintance. I don't know if I can sift that like strongly. If you have like thoughts on it or you want to work through it, that's fine. But I know that's an
well,
area of weakness of mine.
you know what I was gonna say is I didn't make this connection until now, but I actually think that, and from what I recall, it's not actually made explicit by Jackson, but the third clarification actually kind of also clarified this objection for me is because, well, when we've refocused on like, it's actually less about Mary than it is about Mary's understanding of the beings she's studying.
Yes. Which really
That
should have just been baked into like the scenario, like in the first paragraph, to be honest, because it is clarifying like to an extreme degree.
it is extremely clarifying. I mean, I get because the original thing is so powerful that I understand like you want to start with that and then you want to slide into like into this. But I guess what I was trying to say is like the worry about equivocating about types of knowledge, that's not really an issue at all for me, especially once you clarify that now like the real linchpin of the thought experiment is about Mary's knowledge about these beings, because that's clearly propositional knowledge. Like, you know, is there an experience to being exposed to this stimuli? And if so, what's it like? You know, is it an experience of this form? Is it, is it of this form? Like, does it have this kind of quality to it? I think that that is clearly because I mean, just for the
Uh,
listeners, like, oh yeah, go ahead, Giffen.
no, you go ahead and clarify for the listeners.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, Churchland, Paul Churchland, not Patricia Churchland. I guess Paul Churchland offered an objection that like Jackson has equivocated about propositional knowledge versus like knowledge by acquaintance or know-how. Um, and I thought the reply that Jackson gave was pretty good on its own, but especially paired with like what we've been talking about, where it's not even really her own experiential knowledge. It's really like what she can deduce about, these other beings. Like that's kind of no longer a concern for me. It's clearly propositional knowledge about uh these other beings in the same way that, their mass is a proposition about them. There was a related challenge that was spoken about on 294. Um, it concerns, so the challenge is about kinds of knowledge. It concerns premise two. This is a challenge mounted by David Lewis and Lawrence Nemero. The challenge is that on her release, Mary does not learn something or acquire knowledge in the relevant sense. What Mary acquires when she is released is a certain representational or imaginative ability. It is knowledge how rather than knowledge that. She knew all that there was to know about the experiences of others beforehand, but lacked an ability until after her release. Oh, I really liked the reply to this. I don't know if you guys did or not, but I really liked the reply because basically like Lewis says, okay, well, imagine that she was actually kind of skeptical about um imagine that Mary was actually before her release, she was skeptical about like the presence of other minds at all. Like she was kind of almost a solipsist in a way. Um, and then she gets out. Uh, on her release, she sees a ripe tomato in normal conditions and so has a sensation of red. Her first reaction is to say that she now knows more about the kind of experiences others have when looking at a ripe tomato. She then remembers the lectures about skepticism of other minds and starts to worry. Does she really know more about what their experiences are like? Or is she indulging in a wild generalization from one case? In the end, she decides she does know that skepticism is mistaken. And so the question is, what was she toing and froing about? Her abilities? Surely not. Her representational abilities were a known constant throughout. What else was she then agonizing about, other than whether or not she had gained factual knowledge of others? I really liked that reply. I thought that was really, really interesting because it does really highlight that, okay, you know, it's not her abilities, it's not her imagination, it's not her representation. She really is wondering, like, do I have knowledge about these other creatures? Um, And so I just, it's not something that we were debating, but it was I also felt like the way he made that point was really, really cool. You know what I mean? Um,
No, I think that was clarifying and it related to kind of our thought experiments with
oh,
the
that's true. No,
machine
that's
and
true.
the
Yeah, I
aliens.
think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
No,
good.
that's true.
Good to work through.
Um, he says, I grant that I have no proof that Mary acquires on her release, as well as abilities, factual knowledge about the experiences of others. And not just because I have no disproof of skepticism. My claim is that the knowledge argument is a valid argument from highly plausible, though admittedly not demonstrable, premises to the conclusion that physicalism is false. And it's like, yeah, I, I do think that like one of the kind of slipperiest things about this is that like none of the premises are demonstrable because it is like, I don't know, consciousness is like the most inaccessible thing. Like we've been talking about, like it's like it's so inaccessible, and the problem is that like if you do, I don't know, if you try to use other heuristics for it, like on a lot of these thought experiments, you're baking in like a conclusion into like how you're setting it up. So it does have to be accessed in like these very oblique, indirect ways,
Yeah.
um, which I thought was just like an entertaining point. What were the last two objections about? Oh, it proves too much.
The ectoplasm point, I'm not sure if I
That wasn't a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, as
No,
well
I
as
mean,
the imagination point wasn't too good either. So
no, I think it was probably the real clarification or the objection was the first one. I think that maybe
it's
the second
knowledge.
and third.
Yeah, like the
Yeah,
real
it's
issue is
knowledge.
like knowledge
Yes.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, do we want to do a we've been recording for a little while at this point. Do we want to do a kind of like a little bit of a bookkeeping on like where we stand at this point to move forward?
Sure.
In that kind of spirit of like, at least for myself, I actually would really enjoy tracking like, okay, what am I confident about as we move through as we move through like
I like
this?
giving numbers. I like the 10 scale and just like having to throw something out.
Yeah. Okay. Currently, I would assign it's so it feels like so insane to kind of like state a high number for this, but at the end because it's just an intuition, but at the end of the day, like that is a lot of what we have to go off here.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm gonna say for the claim that given our specifications that Mary is not of the same species and does not speak the same language, the total that being a perfect reasoner and having the totality of physical knowledge, there is nothing contained in there that would indicate which or whether a stimuli or an interaction would be conscious. Um, I assign I'm going to give that like an 8.5. Like my intuition's very strongly pulled by that, in agreement with Jackson. Where are you guys on that first proposition?
I would have come in much stronger tonight on that one, but
Hmm.
probably weirdly enough tonight, very open to the idea still, but I think less confident that's true. So probably closer to a four. Like,
Wow, interesting.
yeah, I think,
Wow.
yeah,
Given our previous conversation.
it is shocking, and I wonder if just like
I say
I,
like imagine a rectangle and Adam's entire world changed.
but no, but I almost wonder though, like if it's just like the biases of just working with code for the last year and a half have
Yeah.
made me view the world in such a way that's like
Hmm.
very different.
No, I
And
actually really
especially like,
appreciated that you were pushing like the computer hypos because it made
mhm,
me think about things in ways that I don't.
it,
yeah.
and it's not perfect. It's not a perfect analogy because once again, it's like, of course, there's a physical input. Of course, we all recognize a physical output, and it's not analogous to the brain because we're saying most certainly physical input and then maybe non-physical output. Like
At
if we're
least at least there could be because I would think that certainly there's a physical input and a physical output. But the question is there also a non-physical output?
yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So and I
Adam,
at least tonight, I'm wondering if that distinction collapses with perfect knowledge. Not that I could ever like spell it out.
Sure, sure, sure. Not that I
Solve the
have the
field
perfect
on this.
knowledge.
Yeah,
we'll be
no,
expecting your
no.
report next Friday, Adam.
So solve all of like the brain physiology and the
Yeah.
complete field of
And
like
philosophy.
yeah, yeah,
It's the Zoom call. I'm here reporting from perfect knowledge.
yeah. No, but I'm a little more skeptical than I have been in the past that distinction collapses. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how my intuition changes over the course of these readings, but that's where I'm at.
Hmm. Where are you on that initial proposition, Giffen?
So the initial proposition is that essentially all physical knowledge can get you there, cannot get you there, right?
Okay. Yes, yes.
Okay, just
Yeah.
confirming it was been a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hesitate to use the word confidence in anything in this field. I'm gonna put myself at like a six. I think it's more likely than not, but
Mm.
also just like who knows what like I could be reading after this, and especially like the knowledge that like Frank Jackson himself has shifted his opinion. Like there
Mhm.
has to be at least something that could shake me. Even a 6 seems like a little bit much, but that's like that it describes my leanings less than my confidence. Or
That's a
like
good way to
no,
put it. Like
more than my confidence.
when I say an 8.5, I'm saying it's an extremely powerful intuition that I have. My confidence in my confidence is quite low. You know
Okay,
what I
okay,
mean?
okay, okay, okay. If with
It's
that
super,
qualification in mind, my intuitions are at like a 7. Like it's
yeah,
like a noticeable like significant lean, but also like, am I gonna be like a 4 next time? Am I gonna be a 2 next time? Like
sure.
feasible, very feasible.
Yeah.
Also, I had one
Oh yeah.
um point at I'm just kind of curious. I can't help myself but ask. Are you like whenever you like think about like a computer, given all your experience with kind of like coding and such, do you feel like based on just intuition that there's any non-physical output to the computer?
No,
You think there's
although
no non-physical output?
I think there are kind of amorphous concepts that we could map onto the computer that we would kind of categorize as non-physical. Like there would be representations that the computer outputs that don't map perfectly onto anything physical.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that the computer is, in our sense, experiencing anything. You
Okay,
know what I
cool.
mean?
Well, I'm looking yeah.
But in terms of like non-physical output, like yeah, I think there is.
Okay, cool. No, that's clarifying. And I'm hoping to explore kind of like the representations in the future.
Hmm.
I think you said at the beginning that like representations was like one of the things that I guess Frank was thinking about when he changed his mind. Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that at the beginning
So
and was kind of curious about it. But yeah, cool. No, I think that's a Jordan, I think it's a really good idea to kind of just like do some bookkeeping at the beginning and end. I think that
Yeah.
adds a lot.
Um,
it doesn't Chalmers actually kind of go that route a little bit too? Like he's in his kind of theory of consciousness, he goes into whole representational models in the brain.
yeah,
I don't it's been a while, but
it's been a while, and the problem is that I know much more about Chalmers' interaction with other theories than I do about the theory that he puts forth himself. Because I think it's just been a little while. Um,
we're gonna have to go through all these because I'm excited. I would say
yeah.
my confidence in where I'm at right now is a 1.
Oh
So
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
pretty low.
yeah, yeah.
But my
here's the other
intuitions,
thing.
yeah.
Um, there's actually this is not something we should we need to talk about now, but also there are further open questions in my mind about the relationship with what we think about the answer to this question Jackson is raising, and almost kind of how we began this episode, what that actually says in relation to theory of mind. Because this is not like, like we were saying, this is, yeah, it's related to like the philosophy of mind, but it's not, it's kind of broader in some sense. So like, okay, like one thing that I want to figure out is like, okay, what does the answer to this question imply for the plausibility of other theories in the debate? Because currently I don't know what I think about that.
Yeah.
But no, cool. Also, I will. This is I one paper that I definitely want to read is the one that you referenced years ago, Giffen, the Dennett paper about the two computers or something like that. Because I've never read that paper, and
I don't even remember
oh,
my
really?
reference to the paper.
Okay.
No, I mean at this point, like it's been so long ago. What is that, like 7 years ago? No,
It was
maybe
it
not quite
was
that
a
long.
fucking
Or
while.
Oh, 4 years. Mr. Memory, thank you.
Um,
it could have been 5. It could have been 5.
it could have been like 5, yeah.
Five sounds about
But
right.
um,
It was either fall of 2020 or fall of 2021.
it was during the
Okay.
COVID times, yeah.
That sounds
So.
about right. But yeah, long enough ago that my poor brain can't produce it. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with reading it.
Because I remember you referenced, and it's a famous thought experiment, but I've never read the paper, and it wasn't like brought up really even in anything we read in the seminar, but it seems like it's so fucking relevant for like what we're talking about. So
I'm down.
We
based
should
on
read that crazy Chalmers paper that blew our minds.
the flickering one,
Yeah.
The flickering one?
it's a Giffin. This is okay. This was the last thing that Adam and I discussed before we just kind of because we were discussing these things like last spring during
Oh,
the
I was
seminar.
wondering when. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we discussed a few of these papers during the seminar, but then we kind of fell off because that was right around, well, it was this time last year,
Yeah.
and things were just kind of going haywire with like the application cycle. It was just kind of like, I don't know, it's one of those situations where it was just like, doing the classes and trying to figure out like the future of my soul and
Yeah, no,
and
completely reasonable.
and doing this. We just kind of fell off the
So,
wagon
so
with it.
that is whenever you were last discussing this. 'Cause it was unclear to me from like the conversation whether this was something that you were doing like last fall or if it was something that was like
No,
be
no, it was like
before
a
that. Okay.
year ago.
Oh,
But we
okay. So
only
I feel a
got
lot
up.
better about like kind of picking back up from like a from scratch. I was a little bit
Oh,
worried that we were gonna be.
we wanted to really dive in, but we only got like 3 in.
I know we
So
only got like three in, and then just like kind of a bunch of shit hit the fan for me, and it just kind of
Yeah.
fell off.
So I mean, silver lining is now like I have like a schedule that can accommodate it. I'm at like minimum
sweet.
credits after doing maximum credits last semester, so it's going to be a joyous semester.
That's
Amazing.
excellent,
Amazing.
actually. That's excellent. I was trying to think of, well, we can figure out offline what we want to do next,
The
which is
Chalmers paper is just definitively
it's
good from what I
it's
call, so I
insane.
think we should do that next.
It has to be on
So
the agenda at the very least.
yeah,
What
yeah,
was the
Yeah,
name
it
of
next.
the
was one
thought
of those.
experiment? The
It was one of
flickering?
those. It was one
No,
of those
it's
papers where like we were just like, okay, okay, okay. So like, okay, it was one of those things where you close your eyes and kind of map it out with the other person with you. And then it hit, I got it. And it was like it was the get was so crazy. And then we didn't really talk about it. And I've just almost completely forgotten the paper.
Oh,
I thought it was
perfect.
I thought it was an incredible payoff. Like I immediately after the conversation was talking to a friend I went to college with, and we were just chatting about it for a while. And I was trying to impress upon that person the craziness of the thought experiment. I failed, but because she's a skeptic when it comes to non-physical consciousness. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
so
Yeah, and it is
but
directly related to the debate we've been having because it's an anti-physicalist argument.
I
yeah,
see.
that's why I want to immediately get back to that and be like, okay, then
Yeah.
bring me back to the light with this here. So because I recall it being a crazy paper. So
No,
Yeah.
that's glorious. Is it a long one?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I
glory.
I didn't think it was like short, but I didn't remember it being too long.
It's not a
Uh,
40 pager, but it's not its five
No,
pager.
no,
no, and it's
it's
also
probably more than
10?
10 though.
A
Yeah,
dozen? Okay.
yeah, it's like a
yeah.
dozen, I think, and I think it's also pretty clear what is, nice to read, but ultimately kind of, grounding and fluff and whatever, and like, and then you can really tell like, oh, this is it right here.
I,
Like,
I'm hyped. I'm sold.
it was a nutty paper, so we'll read that next time.
Please.
All right, excellent. Well, I hope people enjoyed this introductory foray into what will eventually become more narrowly the philosophy of mind. But no, it should be a really interesting series. And it's cool that like we all are this is a very like we're not coming in with a lot of commitments
No,
to this. Yeah, pretty much none. So
none.
Zero.
no. Okay. Well, if you're listening, hopefully these are being uploaded a very regular time frame. This is February 7th, 2025. So whenever whenever this better be fucking going out. I need to get way better about that because it's just so unacceptable to let things linger. But okay, well, I hope people enjoyed it and tune in next time. I've started a new Instagram. You can find that by searching for the user name is Plato's Cave Podcast. That's all one word, no apostrophe in Plato's. You can find me as you could before on Twitter or X at Jordan_C_Myers. And my website, jordanmyers.org, is going to be updated shortly. It's a good way to sort of, I guess, either get in touch with me. You can contact me through there, or it's also a place that I'm going to trying to use to upload sort of recent work of mine that I'm in the process of developing.